Bore da, a croeso cynnes iawn I pawb. This is the Velindre University NHS Trust September Public Board meeting. And I'm very pleased to confirm that the meeting is being live streamed today and will be available on the Trust website should members of the public and staff wish to view this meeting later on at their convenience. It's the second day of autumn today. First day of autumn is when we've got equal day and equal night hours. And so from today, the nights are longer than the days. So we're straight into autumn and winter. So on that happy note, I want to welcome all of you who've joined the meeting today. We do have a mix of staff and members of the public who've logged on to join us today, and you're all very welcome. As we did with our previous virtual board meeting, the format involves the Director of Corporate Governance, Lauren Fear, who will introduce each item and remind us of the time that we've set aside for that particular item on the agenda in an attempt to kind of keep us to time. So with those few introductory remarks, I'd like to officially call a start to the meeting. We've got a number of items which are for approval. And so can I, board members, ask you, when I ask if you approve, if you could raise your hands, and if you wish to ask a question or to speak, if you raise your hands, I've got everybody's pictures on screen, and I'll call you in. So item 1 on the agenda is apologies, and we have apologies from Mark Osland, our Executive Director of Finance. I don't have any other apologies. Does anybody have any to inform you of? No, thank you. Can I welcome Bernadette Rowlands, who's been online with us, Bernadette, for about 20 minutes or so, I think, from Aneurin and Bevan Community Health Council. This is your first time to join this particular board meeting. You're very welcome, Bernadette. And of course, I can see the chair of the CHC, Stephen Allen, is also with us. Matthew Bunce is here representing Mark Osland. And Katrina February from Audit Wales. Yes, I can see you there, Katrina. Welcome to you as well. And can I also welcome David Cogan, who's our patient liaison representative. I can't see David now, but oh, there you are, David, right in the middle. Okay. The next item on the agenda is declarations of interest. So I'd like to ask, please, if any member of the board has any declarations of interest which are pertinent to the items on today's agenda and which have not already been declared. So I take that as a no. So if we can now come to matters arising and go to 1.41, which is the action log from the meeting held on the 30th of July. So 7.3, radiotherapy performance, that comes through in a number of papers that we're looking at today, but it does say that we do an update in September 2020. This is the financial situation in relation to our funders. Is there, Matthew, are you going to report on this in the finance report?
I can give you a brief update. Essentially, as you all probably know, during this financial year, due to COVID, there's been an agreement with commissioners around block contract arrangements. So essentially, for Q1 and Q2, we've been operating on last year's outperformance performance, and receiving our income on that basis. The intention is for hopefully that to continue for Q3 and Q4. So whilst the radiotherapy case that was submitted to commissioners last year and approved by the 2 health boards, funding in relation to that is still flowing to us. And clearly, there's still further work to be done with Aneurin and Bevan on that. But given we're in block arrangements during the COVID period now this year, that negotiation and discussion is probably going to play out next year now.
Thank you, Matt. Can you confirm that the block arrangements will flow into Q3?
Unfortunately, at this point, I can't confirm that. A paper was presented to Deputy Doffs setting out a range of options. Velindre Trust, alongside 6 other organisations in Wales, supported a block arrangement for Q3, for Q3. 3 organisations preferred the approach of moving back to normal arrangements in terms of LTA monitoring. So basically, the paper went up to Directors of Finance, and they've asked for some further information on some of the options. So at this point in time, we haven't got agreement around Q3. As soon as we get that, that will be shared with the exec team and others.
So we can bring that back onto the agenda if needs be.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Matt. So for item 2, decisions over 100k, that work is ongoing, as you note in the actions column, that we're expecting that to be finalised by the November board. In relation to that, the letter of accountability, which should have gone from the Chief Exec to the Director General. Steve?
Yes, I haven't sent that letter yet. There's no overriding requirement from the Director General for it as yet, and the issues that we wanted to raise at the earlier stage, the key ones were resolved. So I'm waiting really for this block contract issue to work its way through, and then I will finalise the letter. So
I think we would hope and expect that we can report at the next meeting that it's been submitted. It's been on the action list since June, so
yes,
it needs to get off. Well, one way or another.
I close
Thank you, Steve. So the next item was about the radiotherapy capacity demand modelling. We did have a full and detailed briefing at our board briefing session on the 27th of August. And I just wanted to ask how this will be reported going forward. Will performance on this come through quality now following that? So we had a detailed report about the modelling, the effect of COVID, and resetting the service and so on. And that was very helpful, and we were able to give it the time that it needed for everybody to understand the situation. And I'm just wanting to finally sign that off by asking where it goes from here. Would that be through quality?
Chair, I'm happy to take that if you like. I think there are a number of pieces of work that are coming together. We've done the more detailed operational modelling work to get us through the next couple of months with the adaptations that we've had to put in to respond to COVID. But also we've been doing another piece of work with Improvement Cymru and with the health boards, which Dan Phillips has been leading on behalf of the Trust. And that's looking at not only the changes that we've had in the last few months in terms of patterns of service demand, but also looking at projecting that forward through now to the end of the year and into the next, into 2021. So the plan at the moment, we've received a presentation on that this week. It is a tremendous piece of work that's quite groundbreaking in terms of our ability to make some projections. And we're going to be bringing that together with the latest update on our capacity, and then obviously looking at any gap that provides us. So that piece of work is ongoing, and we'll bring it back to the board through another development session and back to the board in a number of ways. And I think that'll be through the performance, but also through, I think, just some time for us to provide you with a more detailed update. So we'll work through with Lauren and you in the next couple of weeks to understand how we can bring that to the board in a most appropriate format.
Thank you, Kath. I just, if I lose it off the action list, I worry that I might miss it. So I just want to keep that item needs to be kept live.
Yeah.
Just now. So. So if it goes to next board development session, it might well come to November board or January board, would you say?
I think that we can give an interim update to the board at the next development session, and I do think it's something that we should update the board on in the next meeting, obviously because it's such a high priority for us. So I'm happy for us to take an action on that.
Thanks, Kath. Thanks. That's I'm very pleased with that. 2.15 is closed. 6.1 is closed, and the performance reports are improving all the time. I've just got one little comment to make, Kath. You would expect no less from me, but I'll do that when we come to the performance report. 8.1 is closed and 10 is closed. I would want to mention that there was one matter which is raised in the minutes, which Donald Fraser raised about acutely unwell patients and unscheduled care during COVID. It didn't find its way to the action log, but it is reported on later in the agenda, Donald, so you will get an update at that point. So unless anybody wants to add anything, that concludes the
Chair,
action
I think
log.
Martin had his hand up.
Oh, thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Lauren, Chair. Just going back to 2.1.5, the Wales Shared Services standing orders. Since you sent 100 pages of documentation through, I thought it would be right that I read them. And in doing so, I think there's a few errors, or perhaps a better way to say is and lack of clarity, I guess, between the functions and roles of the Velindre Audit Committee and the functions of the Velindre Audit Committee for shared services. I don't think we need to take up the meeting's time today over that, but there was a few things I picked up, and perhaps, Lauren, if I send those to you in the first place, we can have a conversation offline.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you, Martin.
Okay, so that came to us as, was that part of their annual review of standing orders, Lauren, when that came?
Yes.
Okay, but if you've picked up other issues, Martin, we certainly need to pick them up. So we'll put that on, we'll keep that on the action log. Thank you. So now we move to item 2 on the agenda, which is the items under consent. The first section, 2.1, is for approval, and included in the list of items for approval are the minutes from the Public Trust Board meeting, which was held on the 30th of July. The contract acceptance and expected urgent decisions report for urgent decisions over 100,000. The Chair's urgent action endorsements. And moving on, shared services delegated authority extension to March 21, 31st of March 21. The trust seal report, and the approved policies as listed in the agenda. The Welsh Language Annual Report, and I'd like to thank Joe Williams and staff for compiling the report. And 2.18, which is the NWIS Wales Informatics Service Velindre exit, which is about setting up appropriate ledgers and bank accounts to facilitate the move of NWIS into the Strategic Health Authority. And 2.19, which is the annual quality statement. And again, Nicola, thanks to you and the team for the annual quality statement. So those are the items for approval. I've not been informed that anybody wants to pull items out of consent into the main agenda, so I'm moving through these items. And then 2.2 for noting, the Collaboration Leadership Forum minutes, several papers for under workforce planning guidance, the Advanced Therapies Cell and Gene Status Update. Note that very interesting paper. Wouldn't mind going through that with you carefully, Kath. So I mean, I think that will make a very interesting board briefing paper in due course. It's just so fascinating. And the convalescent plasma highlight report. So those are the items for noting, and that would conclude the consent agenda. Martin.
Just for clarity, I think, Chair, one of the items in that list you just went through was 2.1.8, which is about the NWIS transition and establishment of a bank account. The paper says the approval would be through the audit committee and the board. Because of timing, it hasn't gone through the audit committee before coming here. but I've discussed that with Mark offline, and that's an entirely reasonable process. We all agreed out of committee that it was a sensible thing to do, so it's come straight here rather than via audit committee.
Thank you for that clarification. Lauren.
Thank you, Chair. So we now move on to section 3 on key reports. So we have the chairs and then the CEO updates and 10 minutes for both these items, and they are for noting.
I'm just trying to find my chair's update. So the first thing I'd like to say on my chair's update isn't written there, but it's hot off the press. I just want to announce to the board that we completed the selection process for a board secretary, a substantive board secretary post yesterday, and that Lauren Fear, who is our current interim board secretary, was offered and has accepted the post of being Velindre NHS Trust's board secretary. So congratulations, Lauren, and welcome on board as a permanent member of staff.
Thank you very much.
Great. So in my report, I'm just informing the board, reminding the board really of what we've covered in our board briefings in August and September. We've covered a lot of ground, actually, if you think about it, looking at radiotherapy capacity modelling and so on, and also our risk appetite sessions, which were facilitated by Ernst & Young. The Integrated Governance Group, we met on the 21st of September. This is a meeting with the IMs and myself, where we meet and kind of, in order to give us an opportunity to touch base. We're not since we've become virtual in particular, we are not meeting other than in formal scheduled meetings, and I just wanted us to be able to meet and touch base. We took the opportunity to go carefully through the recommendations that you'll see later for a review of the board champion role, which is the final stage of a lot of work to refresh and refine the IM board champion role. We'll have our annual general meeting on the 22nd of October. It will be virtual, and we're planning the agenda as we speak, and it will be, I think, live streamed. If I can just check, Lauren, I think it'll be live streamed, don't it?
Yes, yeah.
And we're planning to have some interesting items as we did last year, as a kind of as a community engagement, as well as reporting on the trust and its performance. It is also an engagement event, and so that's informing our thinking. Calls for Queen's Birthday Honours 2021 nominations are now out, and if you could contact the director, Lauren, if there are any nominations that people would wish us to consider. And then finally, I would want to say that I've now had confirmation from the Minister for Health and Social Services to extend the appointment of Mrs. Jan Pickles as an independent member of the Trust until the 30th of September 21, which I'm very pleased about. You remember Jan's term of office would have been up at the end of this month, but public appointments kind of halted new appointments because of COVID, and we made use of the provision that was made to extend IM appointments, and I'm very pleased about that. So I'll take any questions. There aren't any. If I can move straight to the CEO report, Steve.
Hi, morning everyone. Just a few things. I'm not going to take you through a report in detail. Just to start off, I mean, we continue to, all of us, whether in our home life or in work, to live in very challenging times. Not just here, but across the country and across the world. And it reflects on the challenges that we all face. And as we've seen in the last week or so, the increase in prevalence of COVID in the community is having an impact, with local restrictions being increased on a flexible basis. So it is having an impact on us all. I suppose just to encourage everybody, the new app, Test and Trace app was released today, I believe. I'd encourage everybody to actually download that to their phones as a step forward in terms of our approach to over the winter time. It's a really challenging time, as I've set out in my paper, and the challenges facing us get more and more complex as this happens. It's not a straight lockdown as it was before, so flexible lockdown with people being put in isolation. So we're having to react to these situations as we go through them. And it will be a challenging time for the next 8 or 9 months for the organisation. We've begun recovery work over the summer, and maintaining that is going to be a real challenge once the impact of COVID actually takes hold. We continue to work on taking the organisation forward, as well as you see some papers on the agenda today in terms of building us into the organisation we want to be for the future. And lastly, I just want to mention the Nuffield appointment, which we announced last week. We continue to work with our health board colleagues on finalising those arrangements, and we are hoping to release those next week. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any questions for Steve? Thank you. If there aren't, we're not there yet, but Steve, do you foresee we might even end up going back to COVID, the COVID setup that we had when we were in the full throes of the pandemic?
Yes, we started talking about some of those things as an exec team, Donna, and you and I briefly touched on it this week. We need to make sure we meet the call at the right time, because it does put an increased impact in terms of the way we work. So we need to make that judgment call and get it right. I don't think, it's certainly not this week, but I think it might come sooner rather than later that we have to instigate. Certainly some of the arrangements we've kept there. And I noticed this morning that certainly the director of the VCC went off to attend to his silver meeting. So some of those arrangements in place is whether we change the board and I think the gold arrangements, so we need to think about.
It's as you say, it's a feast that kind of moves every day, a couple of times a day, doesn't it? So we just. Oh, Stephen Allen, you wanted to ask a question?
Seconds, yeah. Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to ask a question. Then, obviously, if you are, if that is a possibility, you're going to go back into that way of working to sort of managing sort of the emergency situation. Just making sure that patients are obviously connected, sort of they're contacted to say what's happened to their services, especially if it's stand services down or relocate services urgently. Making sure that they're communicated with as early as possible is going to be paramount, because people are we're starting to get back into a routine. Mm-hmm. Obviously, that's going to be stopped. That don't forget the patient within your internal structure in order to meet those standards and to meet the operational difficulties you're going to be in. I think it's making sure that the patients are informed of what you're doing and what services are available and how they will get their services sort of going forward will be key.
I mean, absolutely, Stephen. And just so that we are clear, what we're talking about is our management arrangements for dealing with what's happening, not necessarily going back to where we were in terms of service delivery. I think we learned a lot over the spring and summer. Our approach, I think, will be different from April and March. Certainly through the work that we've been doing, we'll be assessing that. But clearly, we'll be communicating with patients if changes are needed. But the moment we're not... We have been,
Steve, we have been all along, haven't we? Every couple of days, we put up either a podcast or a post on the website which says, tells patients what our services are looking like and what they can expect. So we'd just carry on with that, wouldn't we?
Yeah, and I'd probably escalate that as well, increase the volume. I think. Yeah. So, I mean, this is basically, it was a conversation about our incident management arrangements as opposed to a business as usual management arrangements, Stephen.
Okay, if there aren't any other questions, we move on to Section 4, which is quality and safety. So 4.1 is the quality and safety highlight report. So Jan, can I invite you to introduce this, please?
Thank you, Chair. Hello, everybody. Well, as you know, during the COVID, we've moved from quarterly meetings onto monthly meetings. So our last meeting was the 27th of August, but also the remit of quality and safety has increased in order to look at not just the care and quality of services we provide for our patients and donors, but also the care of our staff. So we've had workforce information coming in. I'm pleased to say in the highlight report presented today, there are no issues to alert or escalate to board. There is a real positive from COVID, which you can see in the advised section. So a contribution that we are now making into the blood supply chain that we wouldn't have been making before through some creative piece of work in the Welsh Blood Service. In terms of Assure, as you'll see, the divisional quality and safety reports are really improving, particularly with a more of an outcome focus. So the so what question, you said, we did. So a really simple, straightforward understanding of this is how we are a learning organisation, and it being reflected in those divisional reports. And this is also bolstered by the new listening and learning subcommittee which reported. I think that's all I'd want to raise from this highlight report, but obviously I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. I'd like just to observe one point, which comes under advise, and this is what the Welsh Blood Service accepting donations from all patients with hemochromatosis. This was a matter that I raised with Kath and with Alan some time ago, and they said, well, we'll go away and look at that. And here's the outcome. I'm very pleased to see this development come to fruition. So thanks to the Welsh Blood Service for that. I think a lot of people with hemochromatosis will be very pleased with this development.
Well, it does put a different lens on having a condition, because through that condition you're now able to make a contribution to other people's well-being, which is uplifting in itself. We know that in terms of well-being outcomes, 20% of your well-being depends on you being able to give forward freely to other people, and this is an opportunity in order for us to build the well-being of people with that condition.
Thank you, Jan. Absolutely.
Chair Stephen has his hand up as well.
Stephen. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, and hello to everybody. Just wanted to pick up on one point within the informed section of the highlight report. I should mention that obviously I'm a member of Quality and Safety Committee, and just perhaps to emphasise the value of what sounds like a modest development. It's the practical development of providing additional shelter and cover at the entrance of the outpatients department at the cancer centre. I was at the cancer centre a few weeks ago. It was pouring with rain, and I observed quite a number of patients arriving, being taken out of cars, being assisted by our staff, and actually getting quite wet. And it's only looking at that sort of circumstance firsthand, you appreciate perhaps there's a provision that's been lacking probably since the centre was first built. I don't know. Certainly a very important provision now, with people having to make different arrangements to access the cancer centre, people having to wait outside, not being able to go in. So I just wanted to express my support for what sounds like a very modest development, but it is actually very important as we go into the next stages of COVID, that we provide practical assistance and support to staff, and of course, most importantly, to our patients. Thank you.
Thanks, Dean. And I think that's, I endorse those comments, absolutely. Before we move on from this, of course, you've got the annual quality report in the appendix, which is very interesting reading. It's quite a long report, but that's not a criticism. Thanks for that. Nicola, I just wanted to ask, I know that in the meeting, was the winter flu vaccination programme discussed?
Yes, Chair, we did discuss that, and we have got 2 vaccination campaigns this year occurring. So we have flu and of course the COVID vaccine. We as yet do not know what the logistical arrangements for the COVID vaccines will be, so we are actively involved in the national meetings around that and will respond as soon as we have the information. It does have an impact, however, on our flu vaccination campaign, because there has to be a 28-day gap following a flu vaccine before you can administer a COVID vaccine. So therefore, we have had to do much more stringent planning and arrangements this year, and our flu vaccination campaign is starting next week. We've signed a dedicated resource to coordinate that with both divisions, and we will be keeping the Quality and Safety Committee abreast of our vaccination numbers. We are looking to increase our numbers. We did really well last year with 66% of our frontline staff being vaccinated, and we are looking to increase that if we can up as high as 90%, which is going to be a challenge.
Thanks. Thank you, Nicola, for that. So if there aren't any other issues in relation to quality and safety, we move to 4.2, which is the very long awaited, if I had a trumpet now I'd blow it, development of the Velindre University Trust Risk Strategy, Appetite and Assurance Framework. Huge amount of work has gone into this matter over the last 6 months or so, which, given that we've been in the full throes of COVID, is testimony to how important we've seen this work in taking forward this work and bringing it to a conclusion. Of course, you never conclude with risk. There's always organic, developing and moving. But Lauren, I'm going to hand over to you to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't think you were going to say that, but there's an indication of how important risk is to an organisation. Getting the trumpets out for the developing of the framework, I think, is testament to that. So casting our minds back to January, which does seem like another, well, a lifetime ago, we set out as a board a fairly ambitious programme to develop a number of aspects of our risk assurance strategy and framework. And here today are a number of items for approval. So the revised risk management framework and associated processes, a newly created risk appetite strategy, which includes then the updated risk appetite levels that have been discussed informally with the board and here today for formal approval. And the trust assurance framework, which is a new product and tool for the organisation going forwards. So I'd like to thank everyone around this table and lots of the senior teams for each exec. We've had over 20, we've had 18 workshops, and Michelle, who's on the line, has been instrumental in coordinating all of that. And there's so to talk around the development of the content that will be refreshed within these new frameworks. All of that has been has had huge contribution from individual execs and IMs, and over the next few weeks we are now pulling that together into a view that everyone can see everything in one place. And I've talked to Martin and I have talked about the important role in audit committee in that process, for instance. So as we go through the next set of committee meetings, each committee will have a view of its sort of refreshed part of that content, and then all of that will be brought back again to the board in November. And the final point I just wanted to make is in the cover paper, I've tried to talk around things from a board member perspective, which is important, but more importantly then from a staff member perspective of how things, when we are into embedding and working in this way, will look and feel for them. And hopefully that gives some indication to the board of the type of risk culture that we want to foster and develop going forwards.
Thank you, Lauren. So we've got the cover paper, which you sort of went through, and then there's 4 appendices, which are about the different components, the framework, the risk management process, our risk appetite strategy, and our trust assurance framework. I feel as though I've been to every one of those it feels like I've been to every one of the workshops that you just mentioned. Certainly when I was looking at my diary, I was thinking, how many risk management meetings have I got to go to? But they were all extremely interesting. Martin, I'm just going to, not even a 30-second warning, as Chair of Audit, ask you to comment.
Thank you, Chair. Lauren has worked very closely with me on this, which is, I thank her for that. It's been a very solid piece of work, and as you say, fanfares, etc. It's overdue and very welcome. I know that Audit Wales have flagged this in the past as being a gap in our assurance portfolio, and as Chair of Audit, I welcome this. It's very good. The one thing I would say in terms of risk appetite is they are guidelines, not tramlines. They are to steer us in our conversations, not to constrain us in our conversations. But I fully support all the papers that are in front of us today.
Thank you, Martin. Steve, is that your hand up?
Just to add to what Martin and Lauren have said, really, I think it's a big step for us, and it's really how culturally and behaviourally we embed this in the organisation is going to be the real success of it, and that we end up with risk not being done for somebody, it's done for us all. And I think that's the conversation we've been having through the workshops, and it links in with all of our incident reporting. It all starts to come together as a package of how we want to improve the way we're aware of the issues in the organisation. I think it's such a big step of both of those, and the quality and safety framework that Nick's been working on, I mentioned earlier, on the Quality and Safety Committee highlight report. This all starts to come together to bring us into a different place, I think, and thanks for Lauren for working on this as well.
Are there any queries, observations, comments anybody would like to make in relation to these papers? So today, Lauren, just to get this right, we're noting the progress to date, and we note the content of these papers, and you're asking us to support the next steps as articulated in the cover document, and it will come to November board for final approval.
Well, what I was we can do that. I guess what I was thinking was that these would be approved as frameworks, and these are the final versions of these process, strategy, and framework documents, and then the content will be of. So, for instance, in the trust assurance framework, will be finalised now over the next few weeks in accordance with these frameworks. So it's to approve what's here and then to support the next steps, if you're comfortable.
I'm sorry, Lauren, I got completely different, on my briefing note and the cover paper have got completely different actions. So I apologise for that. So we're asked to approve the risk management framework, the risk management process, the risk appetite strategy, and the updated risk appetite levels as set by the board, which is in the risk appetite strategy, and the trust assurance framework. And that takes us from Appendix 1 through to Appendix 4, and then this begins to drive our organisation forward as from today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll do a comfort break in the agenda at 11:15. It's 22. I think we will have a comfort break. And we'll return at 5 to 11. Thanks, everyone. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for coming back on time. We come now to item 6 on the agenda.
Thank you, Chair. So this is item 6.1, the committee structure development. It's an item for approval and we have 10 minutes.
Lauren, this is again another piece of work which has taken several months to come together. Its genesis is that we made new arrangements which were meant to be agile and responsive during COVID. And if you remember, everybody, we said we're not going to go back to the pre-COVID situation. So we've been looking carefully at our committee structure and how best to enable that we fulfil all the functions contained in our standing orders, but in a way which is as streamlined and as effective as possible. So Lauren, you and the team engaged all of us, all of the board and wider staff groups in developing the new committee structure. So I'm just going to ask you if you want to spend a few minutes introducing this item to us, the bones of the committee structure, and then we'll move to the actions, which is to approve.
Thank you, Chair. So, so as you say, agility was a major driver, and 2 other drivers that we've been discussing for, well, I appreciate discussions were pre my arrival in December, but I've been involved in those since then as well, around how we triangulate data through, and that being through a quality and safety lens in the best way possible. And Jan referred to earlier some of the development in the current Quality and Safety Committee has already been in that direction in ensuring with the workforce data, for instance. So it's a continuation of that journey to triangulate assurance data and performance data in the best way through a quality and safety lens. And one of the second drivers was around a recognition that many, if not all organisations, want to think about the way in which we spend time as a board on the other functions of board in terms of driving strategy and shaping culture. So having a specific committee to give ourselves the time and space to do that as a board, we felt that was an innovative way of creating that time and space for us. So what's in the papers today is as you say, Chair, a huge team effort from everyone here, and specifically wanted to mention Becky and Emma and my team, who have spent many weeks on this and working through the detail to get it into the structure and set of draft products that you have today. So what we are asking for is approval for the committee structure, and on the basis of that approval, the terms of reference and cycles of business, which are contained within the papers, because we wanted to give everyone the assurance of the depth of work that was behind the high level structure. And each of those will then be discussed and endorsed for board approval in each of the inaugural meetings of the committees. And I know that, that there are changes that people want to make. Membership is always a hot topic for any new committee, and an emotive one. So there are things that we that we'll work through, and then bring all of those back as a set, a suite of updated documents in November, and the standing orders will then be updated on that basis.
Thank you. Thanks, Lauren. If you look to section 6 on the cover paper, pages 11 and 12, you have a list there of all of the meetings and the work that was undertaken bringing us to this point where we have a committee structure to put before the board for approval. So are there any comments? It's been an iterative process, Lauren, hasn't it? Where, you know, each meeting has resulted in something additional to add or take away or modify. It's been an iterative process involving a wide range of individuals. So I want to open it up for discussion prior to moving to the recommendations. Steve, and then Martin.
Just a couple of things, Tam. I mean, I welcome this, and we have had a lot of discussion about it. I think one of the key things, we're all going to have to learn how to work in a different way. What we're all looking for is to drive a change in working across the organisation, not just the committee structures. And it'll also give us a really clearer way of triangulating information, I think, than we had before. And also the clear space where we discuss the strategic direction for the organisation in its own right. So I think it's a really important step forward for us as an organisation.
Thank you, Steve. Martin?
Thank you, Chair. Just
Sarah,
something which is just the detail in the report. 1.4, which talks about the current list of committees, lists separately both the Audit Committee and indeed the Shared Services Committee, whereas the proposed structure is silent on the Shared Services Partnership Audit Committee. It will continue. It just hasn't been included in there for, I guess, just by an oversight, I guess. So Jan, Gareth, I'm sorry, but you still have to do that committee as well.
Thank you, Martin.
Apologies. Yeah, I see what you mean, Martin. Yes, it will. Thank you.
Sarah and then Jazz.
Thank you, Chair. Just to reflect really how welcome this is to me in terms of the workforce and OD agenda, because clearly you can't effectively consider workforce in its own silo. It needs to work across all of the other strands of work that we do. So actually this new committee structure really allows us to do that in the best possible way. So I'm very, very pleased to see this, Chair.
I think I agree with you, Sarah. Thank you. Jazz?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to use the opportunity to announce some really good news that we actually appointed associate medical directors for the Trust. And in fact, this structure is really helpful we're going to have a process of induction for them, but actually setting out how things will work, how we've organized ourselves, how we will provide that accountability and where they will fit in is incredibly helpful. I think that, you know, there probably will be some sort of initial challenges. I think being the lead for research, development and innovation, you can see that it sits as a kind of subcommittee, but probably under three of the pillars, if you like. So an important change there, but hopefully a kind of a strategic change which will lead to better outcomes. But so I just thought it was a useful thing to announce for us, and thank you all for your support. It's a new stage for us to be going into, but you know, it's a really good, welcomed development.
Yeah, I don't know if you're in a position to announce things, Jazz, but how many did you appoint?
Yes,
what was it?
Appointed 5 people over the last, well, through COVID, believe it or not. We've been successful in organising ourselves, and we have appointed 5 associate medical. I will email out to the board with details. I'm hoping to kind of pair up with IMs, and I've got a few ideas, but that's for another day. Thank you.
No, I'm very pleased to notice that development, which is it is pertinent to the new committee structure, because it's the framework into which they will slot their particular areas of responsibility. But more importantly, Jazz, it puts a cadre of support around you for the very important job that you've got taking forward. So I'm very, very pleased to see that increased capacity in medical leadership. And I know from the number of individuals who came to talk to me prior to interview and selection and so on, how much enthusiasm there was for supporting you in these roles. So that's really good. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Steve.
No, I'm really pleased. It really strengthens our medical leadership in the organisation and allows us to connect with more depth with the clinical body, actually.
Yeah. So, all right, David. David Cogan and then Carl, okay?
I'm just trying to get David in. He was up in the right-hand corner there.
Yeah, I can see you, David.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question from a patient's perspective. If I've read the detail correctly, I can recognise that the Charitable Funds Committee has a recognised patient representative. In the discussions that have taken place, has that subject been exhausted for other committees? Is there an opportunity for more patient representation in a more formal, structured way?
Lauren, I mean, as far I would be happy with that, particularly, but we're not anticipating changing board level patient representation. Are you suggesting, David, that we contemplate membership? It always comes down to membership, as Lauren said, patient representation on the two subcommittees.
Yeah, I think in Steve's introduction earlier, when we talk about the world changing with COVID, as we all know, I'm not saying anything that's not new to anybody, but obviously the world of patients are changing as well. And the PLG particularly feel that, you know, we want to understand how we can be more involved, both getting closer to the patient world currently and the opportunity to relay that back to yourselves within Velindre. In an independent sort of way and body. So any opportunity to get involved, we openly welcome.
So can I suggest that I welcome that suggestion and that we take it offline in liaison with yourself, David, and then come back, because it wouldn't just be a case of let's put a patient representative. We'd have to think through for what purpose, how will we support that individual, what would be the expectations of them, and so on. So
yes,
should we take that offline?
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks, Chair.
So I know, Kathy, you want to come in. Steve, you had your hand up. Is it in direct response to that suggestion of David's?
Really supportive of taking that forward.
Yeah.
Really.
I think, Carl, did you have your hand up as well?
No, Carl was trying to get David in. Carl, are you all right?
Well, I was trying to come in on that one, but two things I was after, David, and then I had a point to make. But...
Go on then, Carl, and then Kath.
Well, first in support of David's suggestion. Secondly, yeah. I think, you know, there's a broader sort of shape we need to bring to this, isn't there? So there's patient involvement at that stage. There's just citizen involvement at all stages. But we've also been sort of progressing some work, early steps, which stopped because of COVID, around sort of citizens jury, citizens panels, so a more informed, broader section of society. We've got different dimensions and questions to ask of the things we might do now, but also starting to think about the well-being of future generations, Act, sustainability. So I think I think it'd be helpful if we took it in that round, and then who's doing what for what purpose. So I'd love to work with David and colleagues. And the other thing came up in a different meeting this morning was around some work we did get involved in a little while ago, the Mark Doughty work with the King's Fund Patient Leadership, Bevan patient groups. There's lots of people out there doing this stuff, so I think we need to take it in the round and be really clear about what we're trying to achieve. But I absolutely support David's direction of travel.
Thank you, Carl. That's what I meant. It's not just a question of, you know, getting a patient and putting them on a committee. It's got to be much more broader than that, hasn't it? And more integrated. So, David, I think you've got support for that suggestion. So we need to just work that through. Kath?
Thank you.
Yeah, so very quickly, Carl's mentioned a few things I was going to mention, but just to note that David and I and a couple of colleagues had a very productive meeting a couple of weeks ago where we've already started picking up on some of the ideas that we raised, not only how patients might be included in the overarching governance in terms of how we take the organisation forward, but in terms of the service development work that we're undertaking within BCC, with particular focus on some of the service change that we're looking at.
Kath, you've gone very quiet. Oh. Sorry, I can't quite hear you. If it's the same for everyone.
No,
yeah, it's the same for me.
Is that better?
Do you either speak up or turn the volume up, or?
I don't know how to turn the volume up. I'll keep my point for later.
You sure? because you've got quite a few agenda items to come. I don't know if somebody technical needs to come and help you out.
They might. Can you hear me now?
You're a bit muffled.
Okay, I'll get someone to come and help me.
Okay, all right. I think I've called everybody in that had their hand up. Before I move to the recommendations, are there any other comments? So thank you. This is a big piece of work. I'm very pleased it's come to this stage. The board is now asked to approve the new committee structure. So can I ask for the board, can you have a show of hands as to whether you approve the committee structure? So I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much. And we're noting that the terms of reference for the subcommittees are draft, and there will be an opportunity to refine those, particularly matters of membership and so on, following the inaugural meetings. And those TURs will come back here for approval. And then following that, Lauren, you lead the work to make sure that our standing orders reflect the changes.
Yes.
And you report that back to us as well in due course.
Yeah.
And I think we begin the new cycle as from the next board meeting.
Yes.
Excellent. Excellent. A lot of things coming to fruition today, which is very pleasing. So item 6.2 is Local Partnership Forum Highlight Report, which Sarah, can I ask you to introduce this, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Colleagues will be aware that during the COVID response, we stood down the Local Partnership Forum, but we did have weekly meetings with trade union colleagues to ensure that we were working in partnership on a trust-wide basis. Subsequent to that, we've also reformed local partnership arrangements within the two operational divisions. And this paper here actually reflects the final meeting we held of that trust-wide conversation on the 29th of July. So you can see here that we had a varied discussion around fire evacuation, staff safety, the working confidence platform, and then, as I said, the ongoing partnership arrangement that we would have in place. So happy to take any comments.
Are there any questions or observations? Sarah, I think it was pleasing to note that we did work very closely with our trade union colleagues during this period, and that they were very supportive of us and the work that we were doing.
Absolutely, and a number of pieces of work we developed in partnership have since been adopted on an all-Wales basis, Donna, so that was very, very positive to see as well.
So would it be in order to ask that the minutes reflect our thanks to our trade union colleagues for working in partnership with us during this time?
Yes, that would be good.
So we'll do that. Thank you.
We'll ensure that.
Any observations or questions for Sarah? So that concludes. So we're noting that update. That concludes that item, section 6, and we now move on to the fun and games, which is planning and performance. Very important section of our agenda. First of all, we've got the 10.1, which is the Delivering Excellence Performance Report. I think this is led, Kath, by you as our Chief Operating Officer.
Yes, and I'm hoping I've got full volume and you can hear me loud and clear. If I'm blasting you, let me know, because we just turned it up full. Okay, so thank you. The point that I was trying to make earlier on was that David and I met a couple of weeks ago, and with the team we've already started to take forward how we can engage patients not only in our governance arrangements as we were discussing, but also in terms of shaping our services in the work that we're taking forward in VCC. So we're welcoming that input at every level. So just bringing us back to the performance framework, you've got the 3 reports there, one for VCC, one for WBS, and the other which covers off corporate metrics. There's a cover report there that pulls out some of the things that I wanted to highlight, but I'm more than happy to take questions from everybody on anything else. And Donald, in there you'll note that there is a reference to the unscheduled care work that we mentioned in the last meeting, and we said that we provide some more details on. As always, I'm more than happy to pick up on any of the further details within that work as we go forward. And already over the last couple of weeks, Paul Wilkins, the director, this morning was informing us that there are a number of themes that they're picking up and working through now in further detail. So more than happy to share those as well as we go forward. So just bringing us back to my to the summary paper. Only two things to point out really. I think that's around generally how we're managing capacity and ensuring that we're able to meet demand. This is a continued challenge for both the Cancer Centre and for WBS. And obviously, paramount in all of this is making sure that we're doing the right thing in keeping our patients, our donors and our staff safe. We are continuing to meet a challenge in terms of compliance with radiotherapy waiting times and chemotherapy waiting times. And the detail shows you there in the detail in the report. But I would like to give you my assurance that for both radiotherapy and for SACT, we have maintained that assessment and prioritisation approach that we're taking, which is led by Eve Gallop-Evans as the clinical director in the Cancer Centre, with support from the clinical leads in each of those therapy areas and in each of those site-specific teams as well. And they're working within a robust framework to make sure that we're able to make the most appropriate use of the capacity that we do have. But also within that, that I would like to assure you that there are no patients who have breached the first definitive treatment waiting times. So again, both for SACT and radiotherapy, we're continuing to work with health boards to look at how we're able to expand our capacity, particularly for SACT, in the forthcoming months as well, as we're able to return services back out to the health boards. And clearly that is going to be reliant on how we work with them through what could potentially be a particularly difficult winter.
And the second wave.
Yeah, absolutely. The two coming together. So I'll stop there for a second, take any questions on VCC performance before I move on to WBS.
So Donald, could I ask you if you've got any further queries, because it's quite a generic sort of comment about unscheduled care, because you were asking about the acutely unwell and unscheduled care during COVID.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. No, absolutely. It's great to see the activity here, Kath, and thanks for reporting on that. I was going to ask about the task and finish group, and will we have more detail on the, if you like, the recommendations or the things that have come in front of that in due course? Because as you say, it's great to see the activity.
Yeah, absolutely. There will be an opportunity for that to be shared. But also we'll be able to bring any adaptations that we've made as we go along. So yeah, and I'll work with Lauren and the chair to see what the best way of bringing those back to you is. Steve, I think, is wanting to come in on that.
Did you say Steve wanted to come in?
Yeah.
Yeah, Don, I just wanted to add, I think we'll feed that back for the Quality and Safety and Performance Committee, Donald, so it's absolutely cited. Everybody can see what's going on and the detail will come through there.
Thank you, that's great. If I may, can I just check if there are any, so similarly to the radiotherapy, and it's great to see that there's no breaches of the, if you like, the mandated requirements. Is there anything similar for unscheduled care that you can point to that you know, have there been any important breaches related to unscheduled care, or any recommendations that you can point to there?
Sorry.
Kath, you've gone. You're silent, Kath.
Sorry, I'm having real problems with my sound. Is everybody getting a buzzing noise from my microphone?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. Sorry, Donald. I was just distracted by Stuart, who's just come in with some headphones for me. And it's yeah. Sorry, go. Okay.
Is that, are you working better?
Is that better?
Kath, I was only just asking if there was any. So it was great to see around the radiotherapy and the you know, that there were no breaches of, I think it was the Royal College of Radiologists requirements. And I just wondered if there's something similar on the unscheduled care with the task and finish group. Have there been any really key breaches or anything like that so far, or?
Yeah, I can answer that one. I think there's two things, and I think we need to be clear that we're separating the two things. If there is ever a concern around patient well-being, then we already have our existing quality management system within which we report any of that. So I wouldn't like you to think that there isn't a mechanism for reporting that. And I don't know whether or not Jazz or Nick would like to come in on that. The group is looking at feedback from staff, from colleagues, and identifying any ways in which they feel our pathways can be enhanced. If there is anything that arose that's specific at that time, that would be dealt with immediately following a meeting. My understanding at the moment is that that hasn't. We're talking some general terms around general issues around patient pathways. And so to the best of my knowledge, nothing of that nature has occurred within those meetings to date. It is around general themes. But I don't know if Nick or Jazz has got anything to add to that around how we manage it on a day-to-day basis.
Kath, your sound is not good. Just about make you out, but I'll hand over to Jazz.
Yes, thanks, Donald, for the question. I guess the first thing to say is that we measure breaches on SACT and radiotherapy as a routine. Therefore, you are getting that feedback and data as part of the performance. I think for unscheduled care, that there isn't a similar breach measurement. So, but what we do have, of course, is a very clear admissions policy, which was reviewed during COVID and was clarified through our clinical model that we signed up to and this board was made aware of. And we continue to refresh. So it's an interesting time at the moment because things might change again and we might need to go back to that admission policy just to look at, who's suitable to come to Velindre, who should go to the health boards straight away. And of course, we've got our assessment unit, which does a lot of the sense checking for patients that come to us in terms of who we should admit, who we might need to transfer elsewhere. So there is a lot of data being monitored through the assessment unit in terms of that we are dealing with the right patient the right way at the right time. I think the other metrics that have continued throughout COVID have been, thrombosis criteria, sepsis monitoring, and for those criteria we have performed very well. And so I think there are other measures of perhaps what we're doing with unscheduled care, but I think it's just to explain that context. That's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. That's very clear. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Donald. I was looking at the emergency SACT table, which is on page 6, Kath, and I just wondered about the SACT escalation process.
Yes. So this is about try 3 or 4.
Well, you're better. You're better now.
Okay, thanks. Great. It's obviously my turn to get the gremlin that you had in the last meeting, so I don't know who's due for it next. So just in terms of the process, that there is an assessment process, so that there's a prioritization of patients according to those for whom the start date is clinically critical, and those for whom there is the potential for it being a couple of days late. And that is, as I said, led by Eve Gallop-Evans as the clinical director, with support from the consultants with responsibility for the SACT service, which is Simon Walters. So there is that robust process in place.
And so I think what the table is telling us, did we fail to escalate? It's for 2 patients. Did we fail to invoke the escalation procedure? Is that what it's trying to tell us here?
No,
I'm not sure.
No, not at all. The process is in place and is there. The 2 patients were not treated. One was treated on day 5, and the second was on day 10. For the emergency ones, there was a fail in the system. Yeah, sorry, my error. So yes, but there's been a root cause analysis undertaken on that, and a safeguard has now been put in place to make sure that didn't happen. And I think there was an issue. It was a failure by a particular member of staff on this occasion, and that remedial action has now been followed up.
Okay, thank you. Any other observations on BCC? Any queries for Kath? Thank you. So we've discussed and we note that report. Do you want to turn to WBS, Kath?
Yes, so for WBS, just to highlight the stem cell donations, we know that we set ourselves an annual target for the number of stem cell donations that we anticipate we will be able to provide from our generous public in Wales, and we know that there's considerable variation in that, and that we do have blips in it through the year, but generally either achieve or exceed our targets. So we have had a number of cancellations in July that weren't anticipated, but our assessment at the moment is that's within the normal variation that sometimes we do experience. You'll all remember the changes that we've had in the service, in that we're now, due to the pandemic, we're now freezing the donations that are given so that we can ease their transport throughout Wales, the UK, or the world, wherever they're headed. And also then just to talk about very quickly the efficiency. You'll notice that our efficiency metrics are not where we'd normally expect them to be, and this is generally because of the amount of capacity that we have, the changes in our capacity due to the COVID interventions that we've had to put in, social distancing, and the different types of venues that we've been able to go to for collections. I just really wanted to highlight to you the considerable work that is done by the team in Welsh Blood Service, because we are managing to continue to maintain the service. We're experiencing some considerable difficulty, not in terms of our donors turning up, but in terms of finding the appropriate venues to enable us to deliver our clinics, and in terms of working with the infection control processes that some venues are putting in place. So we are working with Public Health Wales to make sure that Public Health Wales are supporting our messages, and for us to work with venues to make sure that we're able to continue to use them to sustain the blood supply chain. But it is leading to a considerable amount of work for the team in terms of changing venues, rebooking, and all of the background work that's going on to do that. So just to say thank you to all of our venues who continue to support us, and also to Public Health Wales for their support in ensuring that we're able to maintain the service. It is a considerable challenge, and we expect it to be even more difficult as we go through the winter.
Thank you, Kath. Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Just to echo what Kath just said, I've recently been looking to book a blood donation session, and the list is a very changed list to the usual places. So there are some novel places coming up, but nevertheless there is a long list, and it's really encouraging to see that the spaces are still available. And I think it's really good that we continue to keep this service going, despite some venues obviously are less accessible than previously. So well done, yeah.
Thank you. I think I also need to pay testament to our colleagues in the health boards, who are our other customer as well as our donors, and they have been extremely engaging with us in terms of making sure that we're effectively managing blood utilisation and managing the stocks between us and within the NHS in Wales. So
just to add, Martin, my husband's had to go to some places he's never been to before.
Yeah.
To donate blood just recently.
Yeah, we're finding
experience.
Lots of new friends and partners. I think our response to the whole of this pandemic for WBS has created a lot of challenges for us, but also it's put us in touch with a lot of new people. So that's been really good. And then just in terms of sickness absence and PADR compliance, of course, because of the pandemic, we are seeing an impact on those, and we're continuing to work with focus on making sure of our staff well-being, and making sure that we are keeping contact with our staff through the PADR process, but also through maybe sort of shorter, more immediate time-focused discussions. I'm happy to answer any questions on that, and I don't know if Sarah would like to add anything to that on the workforce element.
Do you want to add anything, Sarah?
Yes, but could you just to reflect what Kath said, we've also got August figures, which shows that our sickness levels are remaining around the same level as you see in here for July but we are seeing a slight improvement in PADR up to about 64% for the year to the end of August. But to absolutely reflect the fact that we're encouraging managers to have those individual conversations, whether or not they're recorded as official PADRs, to ensure that we are maintaining that focus on well-being more predominantly, and also to ensure that people understand their roles in the changing environment, and also the elements of the workforce operating model, which we instigated as a result of the COVID response, that we still have up and running and are continuing, is our workforce helpline, where managers are really being encouraged to seek help and work in partnership with professional workforce colleagues to ensure that they're offering their staff everything that we can.
And can you just update us on, I don't know what to call it. We were very grateful for Maggie's support during the pandemic, and Kath, you updated us last week about providing a similar environment at the back of postgrad, I think you said, something like that. Is that coming on stream?
I can update you that that hasn't made the progress that we'd like to. We're making available alternative space in terms of some of the meeting rooms within the hospital, and I was in there yesterday with some colleagues, all socially distanced. But that is being utilised. It's a poor substitute for Maggie's. But there are a number of other options, particularly which have come into focus in the last fortnight. That aren't at a position for me to share with you as a board yet, but we will share in the forthcoming weeks.
So I think we'd all agree we'd like to be updated on that, because you know, staff wellbeing is so, we've just been through a very tough time, and we may be about to enter into another one. So our staff wellbeing is important. So can we keep that as to be updated, please?
Absolutely.
Sarah?
Yes, if I can, in addition to that, we're ensuring that there's more focused communications around the employee assistance programme, which does offer psychological support for staff, and not only staff but their family members. So for anyone in that family group really that may be having a difficult time, and we know that could be for a variety of different reasons, that we are continuing to communicate with staff around the availability of that service. And we also have the managers assist element to that employee assistance programme, where managers can get help and support in helping them work with their teams, because that's a very, very challenging thing at the moment as well. So we're continuing to communicate with about that.
Thank you, Sarah. I think what came over, I'll call you in, Gareth, in just a sec. What came across to us was how much benefit staff declared that they got from having a place to go and have a sit and a chat and so on, and that Maggie's provided that environment during the worst stages of the pandemic, and we were hoping that we could preserve something of that facility going forward. And it doesn't, you know, all the other support services that are fantastic, Sarah, and I'm really pleased to note those. And I know we're carrying on with menopause cafes in an appropriate way as well. But staff was so positive about having that environment, which they can't have in the canteen or anywhere like that, because that's socially distanced and the requirements there. So if we could keep that on the agenda, getting an update on what we're doing about that, Kath, that would be great. Gareth, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I was looking at the metrics and the ones around sickness particularly, which seems to be going the wrong way and has been for a little while. And is that purely down to COVID, or do we have an analysis of it seems to be getting worse every month, and it feeds into the conversation a moment ago about what we're doing about it, I guess?
Yes, it's not predominantly down to COVID, Gareth, and it's actually been fairly static around this level now for a number of months. We're reflecting really the trend across NHS Wales that more general sickness has increased as well. And obviously we're managing that on all fronts, really working with individuals, but also working with managers to help them understand the sort of root causes of the sickness. what we might anticipate now, obviously, is that we'll start to see increased levels of COVID-related sickness, but we're obviously keeping a close eye on that.
Sarah, I noticed on page 3, where we've got PADR status, the raw data's there, and there's a very kind of inviting template of a graph which isn't populated.
Yeah, I think the graph hasn't come out on IBABS, Donna, because it is
okay, that'll be
there on my copy.
Okay, thank you. Martin?
Thank you, Chair. Just follow on from Gareth's question really about the impact of COVID. One thing we discussed at our last meeting was whether we could collect information on staff absences which weren't due to sickness but were allied to it, by which I mean people who are shielding because of COVID, who can't come into work because they're in vulnerable groups or have other issues. We did say we were going to start trying to collect that information. I don't see it here unless I'm missing something.
No, point well taken, Martin. We were developing some reports that did reflect that, so I'll look into that and see where that is.
Thank you, Sarah.
I'd like to make one comment which isn't necessarily here in this performance report, but I note in the annual quality report that we've now entered our 6th year with 0 MRSA incidents, and that's very gratifying for us as a trust to note that, and the kind of incidence of infection generally is very low, but 0 MRSA for 6 years is excellent performance. Nicola, if you could, pass on that observation to colleagues in our to appropriate colleagues throughout the trust, really. Congratulations on that. It's excellent. Particularly given the very vulnerable nature of some of our patients and the susceptibility to infection, to have 0 MRSA for 6 years running is outstanding, I think. I just didn't want to let that that pass by. So we've discussed and noted that report. So we now come to 7.20, which is the progress report, Q3 and 4 plans, including winter plans. And although it says Kathy, I think, Carl, this is your paper. Is Carl there? Carl?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was just unmuting.
That's fine.
I'll pick this up as a transposition error on there. So it's another really exciting bit planning. Looking forward to this. So you're well aware, Q1 and Q2, the requirements that government have asked of organisations, just to make sure we've got clear plans to do with the very immediate, which is a slight distraction from where we've been in terms of a 3-year horizon. So board have received Q1 and Q2. This paper really sets out a bit about process for Q3 and 4. So government have asked us to submit those 2 things now as essentially a 6-month plan, which takes us up to the end of the financial year, so up to the 31st of March. Just by way of information, we were planning to bring the actual draft plan to the board today. It is ready. So we've worked really well with Kath and colleagues in both the frontline services and also support services. We haven't done that because about the last couple of weeks, government have been talking about producing some additional guidance. So that's come out now. The winter protection plan was one of those pieces of guidance which people will be familiar with, and also a series of templates. So planned, but they only arrived with NHS organisations approximately 3 or 4 days ago. So we've got until October the 21st to really make sure that we've covered all the requirements that government have asked of organisations. And it's fair to say they're quite significant in terms of some of the asks, all legitimate, but quite challenging for all organisations, but particularly for health boards when you start to think about test, trace, protect, forecasts on immunisation rates, sickness rates. So you can imagine primary care, diagnostics, so quite significant requirements. So therefore, we haven't brought that plan here today, Chair, because we think we need to run around that once again to make sure we've got everything in place to satisfy the board's requirements, to get assurance that we relatively understand what we believe is going to happen between now and the end of March. And we've got all the requirements in place to service that. The other thing I would sort of mention, before I get into next steps, is that Kath alluded to it earlier, the excellent, there's really good forecasting work going on in the Welsh Blood Service about demand, clinic demand and everything else, and what the health boards might require in terms of elective and essential services ramping up and down. And also in the cancer space, the work that Dan's been doing with Emma Powell, Steph Evans, I believe her surname is, Improvement Cymru and DSU. So just to give you a sense of the work we're doing right now, is to really go back around our scenarios for what might happen between now and certainly the end of March. And we're looking at 3 particular scenarios in respect of essential services. One is largely, there is no peak. The second will be a reasonable worst case scenario peak, where in essence field hospitals aren't required. And the third scenario we're starting to test is if we have to bring, or NHS Wales brings back into place field hospitals, because you can imagine the first two are impactful, but probably wouldn't drag our staff away on the third one. So if we were back into field hospital territory, we might need then to provide some of the staff in our core service to meet higher priority clinical requirements elsewhere. So that's the other scenario work we're going through now, and that will again populate some of our thinking in our final plan. So in terms of next steps, what we're proposing, Chair, is that we've got a meeting on Monday now to go back around the templates. We'll populate those templates. There's a board development session planned on the 22nd of October. Laura and I have been discussing whether if possible, we might bring that forward a couple of days so we can get the board cited on the detail of that plan. We'd submit on the 21st as required, but also recognising the process to date has been all organisations have submitted their plans, but then in real terms allowed then almost a month to take them through normal governance arrangements, because the planning cycle hasn't fallen in line with the planned boards. So we'd probably be seeking then to bring that plan for final consideration to the board meeting in November, which is in keeping with what we've done during the COVID period. So that's our sort of line of sight through the next couple of weeks to get to a plan which will take us towards March the 31st. So I'm just happy to pause there, just take any questions on the process really. But again, just to finish, to assure you, we do have a draft plan which was ready to come today if the templates hadn't arrived subsequently.
Thank you, Carl. Can I just check, so are you saying that you'll be submitting quarter 3, 4 to Welsh Government prior to the board approving it?
Well, we have done all the way through, Chair, if you recall. So
Yeah.
we've always submitted them as drafts, subject to approval at a later date, because the board meetings for all NHS organisations are broadly fallen at least 2 or 3 weeks after the time the boards regularly meet. So what we're proposing really is just to continue with that process.
So we'll get to see it in a board development session prior to that. It'll be in, as far as you're concerned, or final, getting towards final state, and there'll be time to incorporate our comments before it goes down to Welsh Government, and we'll do final approval post hoc in November.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Carl. Lauren, I think I saw your hand up, and then Steve.
Yeah, just to reassure, and Carl has already mentioned, but that is in line with other organisations. The submission time that we're now in with quarterly plans doesn't match anyone's board schedule neatly, so that is in line.
Thanks, Lauren. I got Steve Ham and then Stephen Allen.
So, I was just going to pick up the point that Lauren's made, so nothing else from me. But we have got some choices we can make around it, though, if we feel the need.
That sounds like I think that sounds like a plan we can work with. I'm happy with that. Stephen Allen?
Just a gentle reminder, Chair, for Carl, I know he won't forget this, to make sure that...
Stephen, you're very quiet.
Yeah, so I don't know, that's my microphone moved,
That's
sorry,
better.
I apologise. Just a gentle reminder really, just to share the plans with the CHC movement would be really helpful, just so we can actually influence that. So before submission would be really helpful.
Yeah, of course, Stephen. I understand. We met with you on the 16th. Phil and Kath sat with you, and absolutely, we'll build that into the process, because your input is, and also colleagues from Iron Bevan and also Cuntaf. So just being clear, it's a regional service, a national service. So we'll make sure we get opportunity to come and get your views, and particularly on anything which is related to service change. taking back to the prior conversation at the start of this session.
Any other, I can't see any hands up, so thank you for that. We note the contents of that report, and thank you, Carl, for that. And we come to 7.2, we're running a little bit late now, which is the progress report on, it says Q3-4, is that right? Q2 that should be, isn't it?
Q2.
Which is you, Kath, isn't it?
It is. So bearing in mind we are running a little late, there's an appendix which includes our action RAG rated against the Q2 action plan, and there's the cover paper there. Just to note that some of the actions that are in it are not a task and finished by the end of the quarter. They're ones which will continue out through the rest of the year, and some of them will be circling back round through as well as the situation changes. So I'm just happy to take any questions on any of that anybody's got, with a view to expedience.
Are there any comments for Kath on this paper? I'm pleased to see the Macmillan unit of Prince Charles coming back on, coming back online, if that's the right term, but,
yeah.
Accepting our patients again.
Yeah, absolutely, and we're continuing to work to look at what re-establishment of those services in the outreach venues looks like now for the next couple of months.
Starts to feel more normal, doesn't it? You know, but then who knows now what's in front of us? But it starts to feel more normal in terms of our rhythm and where our patients were being looked after.
Yes, we're really mindful about the impact of patients in terms of the service configuration
and travelling and so on. Anyway, so are there any? Thank you, Kath. Any? I can't see any hands up. So, Kath, thank you for that report.
Thank you.
So that takes us to, I think I've got so 7.4.
Yes, so
this is a very interesting item. Indeed, well, they're all been interesting. Kath, I just explain to us how it is that this has come this section of papers has come about. Extremely interesting papers.
Actually, so in terms of this has come about through a number of things. But if I was to look at the sort of root cause analysis and tell you how it happened on account of a number of extremely enthusiastic staff who are absolutely wedded and fundamentally believe in the Future Generations Act, and who, as part of the ongoing discussions that we've been having, both at board level and on operational level, undertook an exercise to just go back through the whole blood supply chain piece and to look at if there was a way that we could really bring to life some of the things that we're delivering. You know, we've gone through the way in which we work on a number of occasions, looking at how we're not able to demonstrate to live by the principles within the Act, but also how we're able to demonstrate how we do that. So they constructed this as their sort of first attempt at trying to bring to life the commitment that we make and the achievements that we're making. So that is Rhiannon Collins and Sarah Richards. So I'd like to pay testament to the work that they've done, and obviously a whole body of colleagues behind them supporting it and feeding into the work. And I think what it also then does is it demonstrates the spectrum of work that's been done on the blood supply chain programme that's now been in operation for about 3 or 4 years. So you can see there we started to really make it very visual, so that we can see and try to start to present some of the data and the outcomes in different ways. So this is very much a work in progress, and we'll continue to develop it and to look at how else we can apply it across other areas of the business. So I'm just happy to take any feedback or any questions on the attachments there, the PDFs that are there, which try to break down each of the elements into the elements of the Act.
Of the Act. Kath, I thought it was very positive indeed. I'd like to make a suggestion, if I may, under the probably 2.6, a Wales of Cohesive Communities, if colleagues could contemplating placemaking, which is coming out in a number of Welsh Government documents at the moment, and where Welsh Blood Service, I think, is making a very good contribution to placemaking in terms of the way it travels around Wales, and that's about cohesive communities. You know, a community being proud that Welsh blood comes to them, and they've got an opportunity to give blood. And I've brought with me a text which I have found extremely, if you could see it, it's called Palaces for the People. It's not about palaces, it's about placemaking. It doesn't mean we want people to live in palaces, and it's about how to build a more equal and united society. And it kind of fits in very much with Welsh Government's agenda for placemaking. So could we just in future maybe include some of that, because we're doing it anyway.
We are, yeah, absolutely. And this is what we're doing. This isn't about doing anything new. It's about maybe making sure that we make the best of it, and importantly that we're reporting it.
Thank you. Thanks, Kath. So
so if anybody's got any other comments that they'd like to make.
Reads our Part A papers this time, because I think she should be very encouraged to read this section, these series of papers.
Yes, we will be sharing them with her at an opportune time in one of our regular meetings with her. But I'm more than happy to take any feedback that anybody's got around how we do this offline.
Any comments for now? So Kath, thank you very much for that section of papers, and on the board's behalf, can you thank the relevant staff, Rhiannon and Sarah, and so on, will you say thank you very much? The board were very pleased to receive this suite of papers and to note their content. Excellent. 7.5, financial report. Lauren, do you want to introduce this section, confirming how long we've got?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So, so this is an item for noting, and Matt, if you could take us through this in 10 minutes, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So I'll briefly take you through the cover paper and then open up for questions. So the report is to the end of August. In terms of our three key performance targets, the revenue position has a small overspend of 23,000, a forecast year-end break-even position. That's based on the key assumption that Welsh Government will fund our Covert expenditure. The capital position is also on target within the funding set aside to the Trust for Capital Expenditure by Welsh Government, and our public sector payment performance is at 97% to August, and that's within the target. So the key points on the revenue expenditure, just to flag, we had our 1.4 million savings target that we set ourselves in our IMTP. Just to say that we are on track to deliver half of that only. The other half has been impacted on by COVID, particularly around some of the workforce plans that we had, and clearly those could not be implemented. Moving on to COVID expenditure specifically, we're forecasting about 10 million spend, of which 3 million relates to hospices, and it's a pass-through arrangement to those hospices. We're awaiting funding of our key COVID spend to date, which is about 6 million. And we've had specific funding for convalescent plasma, which is about 1.15 million. In terms of reserves, the funding reserves that were set in the IMTP, we have 88,000 of funding remaining on the recurrent side and 72,000 on non-recurrent. We also have our emergency reserve of 522,000. The key financial risk, as you'd expect, is the COVID expenditure that we've incurred. I've already updated on the contracting arrangement for commissioners earlier.
Yeah.
And I've already updated you on the capital side of things. The important bit to say on that is across Wales, we all had to update Welsh Government on the 15th of September in relation to the All Wales capital schemes, in order that they could get a good feel for what slippage there were on those schemes, because they're looking to obviously redirect some of that money in the COVID response over the next few months. And I'll hand it over to questions.
Thank you, Matt. Are there any observations or questions for Matt on this report? It's very clear, very clear. Mark did promise us that he would do a cover report, which I can see your hand up, Gareth. I'll just finish the sentence. That he would do a cover report which led us into the key issues, and he's done that. So I'm very pleased to see that. And Martin is nodding. Gareth, I could see your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question I ask every time we get a financial report as to when we're going to hear from Welsh Government. I notice now we're being told a decision will be made very soon, particularly around the TCS capital funding. But I note also that it's having, because we're paying it out of our discretionary funds at the moment, it's having an impact on other things that we do. So do you have any update on what very soon means?
All I can update you on is we have monthly capital meetings, obviously with Welsh Government colleagues. We've impressed upon them the urgency in terms of having that decision. My understanding is that it is with the Minister in terms of a response. I know Carl's may have more up-to-date information on that, but that's what we've been told by our capital finance colleagues in Welsh Government, that it is awaiting Minister approval.
Carl?
Yeah, I don't want to talk about things we know about. So we know there's a meeting today where a number of government with a number of important matters being discussed. So we're expecting some fairly swift feedback from that. I also just wanted to, I guess, make sure alleviate Gareth's quite right question about what are we delaying if using discretionary capital. At the minute, Mark and I met yesterday to talk about the capital programme. And at the minute, Gareth, there's nothing we've stopped doing, we would have otherwise. So I don't think that, I just want to show there's nothing being delayed at the moment in terms of critical safety or quality issues which are related to discretionary capital and the spend on the broader change programme. Now that's not to say those things might not become an issue as we go a little bit further, but we are expecting some firm decisions over the next 5 to 10 days. But I just wanted to show the board that there's nothing being stopped in terms of critical safety issues which are related to the broader TCS programme as we stand today.
Thank you, Carl. So if there aren't any other queries, because this will be one of the quickest finance report discussions that we will have had, we're noting the contents of the report, which takes us up to August 2020, and in particular the financial performance to date, and the year-end forecast to achieve financial break-even, which is based on the assumption that all COVID-19 related costs are fully funded by Welsh Government. I don't know if we know when that announcement will be made, but that's the assurance that we've been given. And we're also noting the TCS financial positions at the end of August, which is set out in Appendix 1, and we've just had the discussion about that. Matt? Although I don't want to go back and open things now, I've just wound up.
No, I'm just responding to your comment about assurance around COVID funding. What I can say is both in the Deputy DOFs and in DOFs, Welsh Government finance colleagues confirmed that they have earmarked funding for the trusts. They're just trying to agree the mechanism of how they distribute that to us.
Okay, that's very helpful, thank you. And Martin, I could see your hand up.
Yeah, just to say, to reinforce your comment that it's the quickest finance meeting item we've had. I think that's because the quality of the report continues to improve. The summary on the front is very welcome, and I think it answers all the questions I would have otherwise asked.
Yeah, well, Mark did promise us that he would do it, and that's happened. So I'm very pleased to see that as well. It just directs you, doesn't it, into the main body of the report. You know exactly where to look. Okay, so that was 7.5. 7.6 is the TCS Programme Committee update. We don't have a highlight report, Stephen, because of the proximity of the last meeting, but you're going to give an oral update.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The last meeting was on the 17th of September, so as you say, the timing didn't fit with having a written highlight report. So I'll give an oral update now, and the written report will, of course, come to the next Trust Board meeting. There were only actually 3 substantive items of business on the committee when we met on the 17th, due to where we are in the planning cycle, time of year it is, and obviously there are other discussions and decisions going on elsewhere which may impact on the work of the committee. But there were three, as I said, three substantive items, all of which ironically are either covered on the Trust Board already, or one of them will be covered in the next item. So I won't repeat what's been said before, but in terms of what we wanted to draw to the attention of the board by way of highlight and advise was the matter we've literally just discussed regarding that we're still awaiting confirmation of capital funding from Welsh Government to continue to progress the Transforming Cancer Services programme, and specifically that's in regard to what are called Projects 1 and 2, which we would know as the enabling works, accessing and preparing the site, to the proposed site, and Project 2 being the actual construction and commissioning of the building eventually. So we're still awaiting, as we've discussed, confirmation of capital funding. We've already been advised there are monthly and weekly meetings. We are hoping for a decision soon, but again, has been rehearsed and we've been reassured on. At the moment, we are using the Trust discretionary capital to maintain that part of the momentum that we need to maintain. But clearly, there will come a point where we'll no longer be able to do that because there won't be enough available. Hence the urgency of this now being finalised with Welsh Government. And obviously, we recognise many other pressures facing colleagues in the Welsh Government Health Division at the moment because of the crisis we find ourselves in. So that's quite understandable, but it is now becoming quite urgent. The second was around the shore. It's the matter we discussed very early on in the meeting around the reformatting of risk and the registers and the templates. We were given an update on that, how that will then progress for the scrutiny committee. And then the third item, which was informed, we had an update on communications and engagement, and that in essence is captured in the next paper that's on the Trust Board agenda. So I won't say any more on that now, but I will say I do have a comment and a couple of questions on the next paper, which partly flowed from the scrutiny committee and partly from discussions and conversations I've had with staff and other colleagues. So I'll draw the line there with the oral update, Chair, and say there will be a written highlight report at the next board.
Thank you, Stephen. Any queries to raise with Stephen, colleagues? Thank you. If there isn't, we'll come to 7.7, and we're bang on time, which is wonderful, which is the TCS Programme Communication Engagement Update, which Lauren is under your directorate. So Lauren, handing over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So as Stephen said, this is an update which we provided to the Scrutiny Committee also. So to draw your attention to a couple of points in the paper. Firstly, we continue to deliver on our social media plan to support the development of the regional cancer care system, as well as the building of the new Velindre Cancer Centre. And our weekly reach for social media is now around 40,000 with about 5,000 engagements. And I wanted to thank on behalf of the board David for your contribution to that. David's post from a patient perspective was by far one of the most successful of the posts that have been made. So
excellent.
It was great to have your contribution. Thank you, David.
Thank you, David.
Secondly, around the paper references the ongoing programme of work in relation to engagement of all of our stakeholders on the clinical model, and Steve referenced this in the CEO report as well. And thirdly, noting the response to the, there were two petitions that were heard by the petitions committee in the Senedd relating to our work, and we await the formal response from that committee, and we'll obviously then share that with the board.
Thank you, Lauren. That's a brief paper which actually covers a huge amount of work that's been going on in the trust to keep all our stakeholders engaged, updated, etc. Are there any queries or questions for Lauren? I can see Stephen's hand up. Stephen?
Yes, thank you, Chair. As I say, this in a sense flows partly from the Scrutiny Committee meeting, but more importantly from discussions and conversations I've been having with some staff and patients and others who have an interest in this particular matter. And for example, last Friday I attended a staff engagement session at the Velindre Cancer Centre, because obviously it's very important we get the views of staff and hear their concerns about various matters, including the proposed developments. I had a very lengthy discussion with one recently appointed senior member of our clinical team. Very interesting to get their insight, their observations, their views on this. And one concern they raised with me at the meeting on Friday was around social media. And obviously we live in a society which values freedom of speech. It's important that everybody has a voice and that we hear the views of patients, of staff, and local residents, and obviously we want to be encouraging proper public debate. Now, obviously we're all aware that 2 Facebook pages have been set up. There's a page been set up by one or group who don't support our proposals in their current form, and there's a second page which has been set up by a group that does support our proposals in our current form. And the concern which was expressed to me, and I've heard elsewhere, was the concern really about whether there's an assumption or belief in the minds of some patients, some supporters, that the Facebook page, which I'll call, as paraphrase, the supporters Facebook page, there may be a belief or misunderstanding that that's somehow endorsed or supported by the trust, and it's just another means of a mouthpiece for ourselves. So, I obviously sharing that concern with the board. I realise that obviously all of the groups have an absolute legal right and almost like an ethical right to be able to express their views in whichever way they see fit on their respective Facebook pages. But I've got a 2-part question. The first part is around that situation and what we are doing as far as we can to make it clear that what I'll call the supporters Facebook page is not any part of the trust. It's not supported by the trust. It's not an official voice of the trust. So that's the first part of my question. And the second one then, coming back to social media, comes to our own Facebook page, which of course has been established for many years, and for many years has been our official voice, and it's been a useful resource for patients and families and staff around clinical issues, around operational issues, and understandably, perhaps inevitably, that Facebook page has gradually also become a forum for debate around our proposals by those who support them, by those who don't support our proposals. And a concern I've got, partly from conversations with patients, is that many of our current patients are going through a very difficult, distressing time as they go through their journey, and their concern isn't about what we may or may not do in 3 or 4 years in the clinical model, or what we might or might not build where on a site. Their concern is what's going to happen to their care next week or next month as we go through COVID, as restrictions change. Are things changing at Velindre? So for me, from what I can see, our Facebook page is now ending up serving 2 very different purposes. The original purpose of supporting patients and families on their journey through practical clinical information and through operational news. And it's also then serving a second purpose, to act as an official vehicle for the ongoing debate. Now, these 2 things aren't necessarily mutually exclusive for everybody, but for some of our patients, they don't sit comfortably together. So I'm sensing, and I've got a concern that some patients perhaps are finding this very uncomfortable and are, in a sense, being dissuaded from using our Facebook page for the purpose it was originally intended. So with apologies for a very long lead into this, my second question is around what, if anything, we as a trust and we as a board can do to try and address that concern. So there's 2 parts, one around our position on the supporters page and one around our position on our own official page.
Stephen, can I just add, I don't want to have a position on the supporters page without a position on the protesters page. It has to be both.
Absolutely, and I'm not suggesting anything other. I'm just describing.
It has to be both, doesn't it?
I'm just playing back the concerns I've picked up on and the concerns I've therefore just sharing with the board, really.
And just to balance that a little bit, there have been a number of people that I've spoken to who said, finally, with the supporters page, they feel they've got a voice, because there wasn't a voice when it was only the protesters page. They didn't have a place where they could express their support, and that's particularly for some of our own staff. And my take on make it clear that we don't support either group, actually, we have made that clear, and I think if we keep on, we've made it clear that we don't support the supporters group, either through providing information or technical support. We don't provide anything. We have posted that. And I don't know why we would want to keep on posting it. It's a bit like they keep saying, why won't you build on Whitchurch Hospital site? And we say why we won't build on Whitchurch Hospital site, but they keep asking the same question. And there's only so many ways you can respond to that, isn't there? But they keep on, the protesters keep on asking every day, why can't we build on the Whitchurch Hospital site? Doesn't matter how many times we respond to that, they keep asking the question. So we have made it clear. And I don't know how many more times we need to make it clear. My concern, if we set up a Facebook page specifically for TCS, and I understand why you would want to contemplate that, is just thinking about some of the conversations that I was having yesterday, where it creates a boxing ring for them to fight together. Because at the moment, the protesters post on the protesters page, the supporters post on the supporters page. If we were to set up another page, which is our page for, which is separate from the general Velindre, which I think you're suggesting, if we have a Facebook page where we just post about TCS and the developments, they'll both slug it out on there. Both groups would. So I think there's risks whichever way you look at this. There's risks both ways.
Yeah, and obviously I understand that. Obviously, I'm just sharing my concerns, and
yeah,
you know, I want
absolutely
the board to understand and listen to what I've listened to, just so we're all hearing that message as well. And clearly, we will collectively take a decision on how to move that forward. But I felt it was very important that I share what I heard from staff and patients with the board today, which is what I've done.
Chair, I think Carl and then
I can
Steve
see
wants to
Carl, and
come
I
in.
can see then Steve. Yeah, anybody else? Not, yeah, Carl first for you.
You're on mute, Carl.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, I do apologise. I think they're valid points that Stephen makes for lots of reasons. I was just going to suggest, I mean, if perhaps Lauren, myself, and if others take this away, speak to a lot of people with interest, and work out what's the best way forward. Because the other thing for us, we were discussing this over a number of weeks. Actually, if you take away the slightly different views that some parties hold at the minute, what we do have are 20,000 people broadly who've got an interest, and I've never heard of any other organisation right now got it of that level of interest. So how do we turn that into a really productive, ongoing, constructive conversation about the art of the possible? So I think there's some challenges right now, because clearly there's some very strong views on a number of things. So I was going to suggest that perhaps 3 or 4 of us, we've already started some work. We bring that back to the board in very short time. So picking up Stephen's challenge about the patients who have treatment now, how do we support them to do that if they don't wish to be involved in a board debate? And how do we give other people the opportunity to make their views known, and we are always able to listen to them? So that'd be something we could do fairly quickly for the board, and picking up Stephen's points.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I think so, Carl. I'm happy to take it offline, as long as we pick up everybody's points. That's my issue. Steve Ham, you wanted to come in, Steve.
I was going to say the same thing as Carl, to be honest, Donna. So I don't want to add anything at this stage.
Thank you. we're living in very interesting times, aren't we? But what we are going to carry on doing is listening. So we're going to carry on with the staff engagement events. I think there's some for next week, which is scheduled. Stephen, thank you for attending that one. I think it was last Friday, was it?
Yeah, it was last Friday, and I think there's another one scheduled for tomorrow as it happens. So again, if staff are listening in, as I know they are, then obviously we're going to encourage as many members of staff if they have the opportunity to come along to those staff engagement sessions at the Velindre Cancer Centre. Just one last observation as well, Chairman. Again, the one thing I've picked up from all of the ongoing debate and discussion, all the different views, I know the one thing everybody has in common is an absolute desire that we provide the best and safest services for our patients. So whatever our respective views, whatever debate and discussions on, I know that everybody shares that one common goal. And let's hope we can find a way of perhaps building on that and moving together on that basis rather than on where do we different, this, you know, what do we all agree on? That's my hope anyway.
Thanks. Well, I'm very pleased that this item has been brought to the agenda today, and we've had an opportunity to discuss it. So we will take it offline. We'll have a good long think about how we manage it along the lines that Carl has suggested. Before I close that item down, any other comments or observations that have been made that anybody wants to make? Okay, thank you. So the next item on the agenda is any other business. I've not been informed that anybody has any other business. So before I talk about the next meeting and so on, I just want to say, does anybody want to raise anything about any of the issues we've discussed this morning, which perhaps they missed their chance to say something at the time, and or on reflection since something's occurred to them? Just asking if anybody wants to raise anything in relation to any of the items we've discussed this morning. I'd be happy to take it now. I'm taking that as everybody's content. They've been able to have their say. I hope people feel they've been able to have their say. Our next meeting will be on the 22nd of October at 2 o'clock. And it will be followed by our AGM, which, as I mentioned earlier, we're thinking about how we plan that, because it's going to have to be done virtually, and we want to make it as interesting as possible for the public who might want to engage with us for the AGM. So with that, I'm going to close the meeting and ask the board to adopt the following resolution: that representatives of the press and other members of the public be excluded from the remainder of this meeting, having regard to the confidential nature of the business to be transacted, publicity on which would be prejudicial to the public interest, and that's in accordance with Section 1, Paragraph 2, Public Bodies Admissions to Meetings Act 1960. Thank you all, and Part B starts at 1:30. Thank you, everyone.